we're not taught as students or in school that failure is okay. That's actually great. You can learn a lot from that failure, right? How to do it better the next time, how to change things, how to adjust. Life is going to be pretty tough.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more months than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Eric G. Eric has administered personality-based life coaching for more than 20 years. He built a successful education company that used his personality typing method to better the lives of more than 20,000 students, parents, and teachers. As the creator of Utopia Project website and Utopia 16 assessment, he has decimated his method to over 500,000 users since the website's creation in 2016. His coaching program has been used in companies such as Hulu and Disney, universities, and over 40 school districts. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Eric. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Thank you for having me, Joy. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation because I have been a person that has read many books on personalities and trying to understand. Many people listening, like the younger audience, wouldn't understand. Some of the older audience in their 40s and 50s, I used to follow, and I've seen her speak. She's passed away. Her name was Florence Littauer. She wrote a book called Personality Plus. And she literally had the starting of her chapters. There was 4 major personalities and then sub things of those personalities. And she showed them in a crib as babies and how you could you'd actually tell what their personalities were as young as a baby in a crib. And I really found it fascinating. And I started following other people in regards to understanding personalities. And that's one of the reasons why when you asked to come on the show, I thought, man, this is great. Because I always like stretching my thoughts, because the worst thing we can do in society, and I don't know what your feeling is to get stuck in the way it is. Right. And not be willing to learn more. And then when we learn more, we're still telling people the broken stuff when there's actually been proof of something better. Right. So.
Yeah, as a teacher, or at least I always taught my teachers, like, because I owned an education company for a decade, was that if you teach a student everything you know, then you're limiting them, right? Because what we know is what they know, the kids know, is far going to surpass what we know now. And it's going to keep going just because of the evolution, right? We like, I know more than my parents did, and they knew more than their parents. So it just makes sense to keep going forward.
Let's hope that continues on. We have so many people in society today, though, that don't learn past their parents, that they have that learned behavior where they're stuck. And I call it the hamster wheel effect. They just go to work, go home, get paid. They've lost the drive to learn, to grow, to continue to climb. And they're just waiting. They're the walking dead, waiting for their funeral. Right. It's just.
Yeah, I wonder if it just shows it's a sign of, I mean, it's good and bad, right? Because it shows that we're just spoiled. You're in because we're just lazy. And I feel like the hamster wheel is definitely because you don't have to think, and because everything comes so easily to us, then thus it becomes where we're just like, running in circles, because just that's our life. It's been placed right in front of us. We don't have to adjust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas, like, I think if you go to other countries, it's different.
But back to your point, sometimes, like you said, you teach your teachers. You don't want to teach everybody everything. My knowledge in certain areas is way greater than my 5 adult kids. but I don't want to teach them everything because I want them to think. I'm trying to teach them to be critical
Mhm.
thinkers, be thought leaders, right? In their own rights, obviously.
Right.
Not everybody's going to figure it out. Not all my 5 kids are at the same level of wanting to learn. I have one daughter, I used to challenge her for right when she was 11, 12 years old. And I said, okay, you got a laptop. You asked me that question. I know how to respond, but I want you to put some effort in. Figure it out. Then come and talk
Mm.
to me. Let's have a conversation and I'll fill in the gaps. And it got to a point where I couldn't fill in gaps because she would go down the
Mm.
rabbit hole in a good way of learning, checking out different sites and reading. And then it would be conversations. Well, this is what I found out, Dad. What are your thoughts? Not, hey, Dad, this is what I found out, but I still don't understand. Can you fill in the gaps? No. And then it was just, and as she got older, now in her 30s, we have fantastic conversations. And she's, you know what I mean? It's just, it's an evolution of how do we push our children? Do we give them everything? Do we make them entitled, or do we give them just enough to make them thirsty? So they want to go for the well water, or want to go get a drink.
I think Warren Buffett has a great quote about that, where he says he wanted to give his kids enough to where they felt they could do anything, but not too much where they felt like they didn't have to do anything. And I love that because obviously he can give them however much money he wants because he's a billionaire. But he was always just like, and his grandchildren too. He would pay for their college, and he's like, and they would be happy with that. They'd be like, that's great enough. Like he's paying for my college. He doesn't have to give me my entire life, you know, put on a platter. He just would give them enough to where they still felt like they were being pushed to do whatever they wanted to do.
Well, and
Right. And I
that's
think
what
that was,
that's
I
what
mean, I thought that was a great
That's
quote.
what Sam Walton wanted too for his kids. He wanted to teach them not to be entitled, but
Oh,
look at him.
huh. Well, he did give them like his whole empire, right? He split it up between, I don't know how many kids he's got, but I know
Well,
they're like
three
the
three
richest, the two richest people.
three of them are in the top, are set to go over 100 million here. They just announced they're at
Uh-huh.
92 million each. Three of the five, right? But it is what it is. I digress.
Yeah, that's pretty comfortable. That's
Uh,
pretty comfortable,
yeah.
But I know you mentioned you coached. I always think about coaching too, like because I coached basketball back in the day, which helped me a lot with my book, by the way. But like I always felt that, I never ran plays. We ran the triangle offense, so it's not really like, oh, run this pick and roll and do all these kinds of things because I was like, look, none of you guys are going to play in the NBA. Sorry. But the NBA players make up like 0.0001%, the top. You guys aren't going to be there. But what I wanted to do was prepare them for life. And in life, you're going to have to make decisions on your own based on what you see. So I'm like, well, if you see this player doing this, then you do something else, like adjust. But I'm not going to tell you in the middle of a game what to do. You're going to have to make that decision on your own.
Well, yeah. Are we wanting to create a generation of automatons, robots, or do we want to create people that can free think and be critical thinkers and actually go, and be polite enough where they can say, Eric, I hear what you're saying. This is what I believe, or I don't understand this, and be challenging somebody to learn more in a in
Mhm.
a in a creative way. A lot of people today, they don't like what you say. They're very keyboard warriors, or they're very vocal and angry, right? It's unfortunate that we
Right.
don't
Because
have.
it's so much easier to do that behind a keyboard.
Yeah, exactly. I get it
Oh,
happening. I just laugh.
yeah. It's like, what did Mike Tyson say? The social media or the internet has made it easier for people to say things without being worried about getting punched in the face or something like. I'm
Yeah,
paraphrasing, but
yeah. I know which one you're saying. It's so true. So the listeners are probably going, "Hey, get to the point. You're not." This isn't usually what we do. Hey, listeners, I'm
sorry.
always trying to evolve and elevate the Give a Heck podcast. Don't be sorry. Never apologize for being somebody that knows how to communicate and hold a conversation. Right? I love that. So, one of the things I talk about for those new to the show, I like focusing on a person's origin story because it helps us to know, like, and trust and connect with people, understanding some of the things that they went through. Some people have terrible childhoods, some people have amazing childhoods, but usually there's indicators of why they are where they are because of their childhood. So if you could do me a favor, Eric, please tell me your origin story and what key things from your childhood to adulthood that led you to where you're at currently.
When I was a kid, I think from the outside, I think people would feel like I had a pretty easy childhood, which I did. I don't want to, I mean, definitely easier than most. I was the kid who I think for the most part enjoyed school, was fairly popular. I was pretty funny, you know. But what I think a lot of people didn't know is I felt kind of weird inside. Like a lot of the values that I saw being pushed on kids or being like, emphasized were not something that I felt was important. And as opposed to having the confidence to like say, no, this is what I feel is important. I'm not gonna value someone else's values. I think I felt more insecure, right? Like when you like something, like let's say you like apple juice and everyone's telling you should love orange juice. I was that kid who's like, oh man, maybe I should like orange juice. Maybe I'm wrong, you know? And I think that got me to really follow personality theory and study it quite a bit. And what I found was that, people are just different. We have different values and that's okay. Like they all contribute to like the general whole of our civilization. And overall, I think in my childhood, that's what led me to like pursuing this path of like discovering about people and personalities and my own, and why I was not necessarily, I wasn't a weirdo, but maybe I was just a little different. And I think I'm not alone. I think there's a lot of other people like that.
You're unique, right?
I was unique. I feel like everyone's unique in their own way. I know a lot of
Yes,
times
just like our
yeah.
fingerprints, we're all unique, but you were
Right.
based on the fact that you were a child, you were unique compared to everybody else. You were already starting to have a free thinking, critical thought process where do I have to like orange juice over other people, or can I like guava juice or whatever? Something different.
Yeah, I wish I was more confident back then, but I guess that's just part of my personality. That's part of the path, right? Some people are like have a different thought process and they're super confident in that. And of course, they have other issues, right? They might be unpopular. Like kids aren't going to like them because they're maybe a little too honest and they're a little too like straightforward in how they're different. I was a lot more like maybe trying to assimilate to what was like popular. And I think that made me a little bit, on the outside at least, seem a little bit happier. But I think on the inside, obviously, it made me a bit more insecure.
Yeah,
But
makes sense.
that's what I pursued this path.
What were your parents like? How were they influential in you in that stage of your life growing up? Or did you have an outside uncle or aunt or a mentor or somebody you just glommed onto that give you some direction and focus?
Mm. I would say they were helpful in their own way. I'm going to mention my mom first because I always mention my dad on podcasts of how much he meant to me. So give my mom some props in that my mom's a school principal. So if you're talking about like follow the rules, being straightforward, do this the right way, I'm putting that in quotes, air quotes.
Yeah.
My mom would be that person. But in fairness to her, I think at a young age she realized I was a bit of a, I guess, talk backer. I would give her crap, and I think she was okay with it, which I think showed a lot of patience on her part. I think even deep down inside, she's like, well, look, this is not how I am, but my son's like this, and I do love my son, so I'm just going to let him do this kind of thing, even though in my mind, I'm like, this is the wrong thing to do. Um, and maybe it's because I had my father, and my father at an early age told me, at the end of the day, do whatever you want because no one's going to give up, whatever
Yeah.
you do, right? They're not going to care. So just do what you want, you know, and do it well. And I kind of followed that piece of advice
What
quite a
did
bit.
what did your dad do? Or what does your dad do?
Well, so my dad was he was a systems engineer
Oh,
or
okay.
systems analyst. Yeah, which I don't think he ever really loved his job. I think he loved the people. Also, I have to say that my dad would not survive this work environment now. I think he would get sent to HR like every day because he was that type of person who would send inappropriate emails with jokes that he thought were funny and like no harm being done. Like he just would think it would be funny. But of course, I don't think he can do that anymore. I think he might get in trouble. But he was definitely someone who would just say what was on his mind because at the end of the day, he was like, oh, it's all in fun, like he never took himself that
So
seriously.
he was like a Jim
And
Jim Carrey of system analysis.
I guess, yeah, like he's just very clever, like
Yeah.
he's a very clever person. And I don't think he loved his job, but he did it. He loved the people around his job and he had a lot of hobbies. So he was really into cooking. He built his own barbecue grill, he would build things like shelves and he would always tell me this is like the real thing to do. Like all that stuff you're learning in school. He would always get mad that they don't have wood shop anymore or a metal shop, because back in the day when he was going to school, those were his favorite classes because he could do something practical with what he learned. And yeah, so he was a great influence on my life.
It's great to have those traits and qualities though, where you want to be creative and build, and then your mom being one way and being the principal, but also tolerating your rebelness, being that rebel, that person that would speak differently. We do need yin and yang in our lives though, right? And I'm not saying
Yeah.
that a person needs to have both a mom and a dad, right? I raised my kids as a single dad after I got divorced. I had full-time custody of them, eventually after a while. You can, but then your children will seek out other aspects in life. Hopefully it's not bad. Right. Hopefully it's not with the wrong crowd. It's a coach of a sport, or somebody, they maybe it's a relative, an uncle or an aunt or whatever too. And that's what my kids did. They sought out
Mm.
other opinions because they were involved in sports and different things like that, right? And dance. And it's good though. Like, look at yourself. I bet you have some of your dad's humor. And I bet you have some of your mom too that you may never have been willing to admit, but you had a nice roundabout childhood, and it sounds like.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a lot of my dad's humor because I think I'm always offending people as well. But it's all in good fun, And I think my mom was always more athletic. So, not to say that I'm a world class athlete, but I think I'm on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm at least a 6 or 7, and I feel like that is because my mom was always pretty athletic growing up.
Well, that's
So.
awesome. So those listening or watching, I would challenge you to sit back and think. Obviously there's circumstances where you didn't get anything from your parents, but if you're somebody listening or watching that had, a mom and dad, have you ever thought about what you've learned from them? Have you ever thought about what, you know, their part was in your origin of where you are today? And I challenge you to do that because it'll give you more appreciation for what they did, invested, sacrificed in your life, right? So I appreciate you sharing that. So, Eric, you wrote a book called The Power of Personality, correct?
Yes, I did.
And is the
All 300 pages of it.
300 pages? Wow, my book's only 150. That's good though.
Oh, but I talk a lot, and I write a lot, so it's probably only 120 words if you compress all the importance down.
My editor and publisher kept on telling me, you got to keep it to 30 to 35,000 words. You don't want it to be, and you
Mm.
got to keep it at a grade A level to make it easy for people to understand, and all valid points. So I'm not criticizing them, but yeah, so I had to dial it back and shorten chapters up and stuff, but that's fantastic. So it is accumulation of decades of research and application. I know myself writing my book, it opened up my eyes to what I have gone through in my life. My origin is where it started, and where I have been, where I am now, and still accomplishing to continue to grow myself and continue to serve others. What was it like for you writing your book?
It was fun. Like, I already had it because I had a website, and I kind of had everything in my head structured out. Like, because my book is basically my personality typing methodology. Now I explain it using lots of like anecdotes and like pop culture references. But writing it was a great process, but it was also pretty quick. I think it took me about 3 months, but it wasn't because I'm a great writer. It's just because I'd already thought about these things and how to structure it for so long that I finally just put it to the page, and it went out. That aspect of the process was very smooth. I think the writing process.
That's good. So did you have any epiphanies when you wrote it though? Like, I know, I understand you had a website, you had all this structure, you had all this knowledge already, which you were applying to paper. Were there any times in that 3 months of you writing the books that you just had this like, wow, I didn't really realize how much that affected me or how it affected others?
I think, at least in terms of craft, I was getting notes from people, a friend of mine who also is a published author, and when she basically said, you know what, like, the parts I like best are the stories. Like, do more stories. Like, anything where you're telling like personal, like, not necessarily me personally, but like I would write about a player that I used to coach. I was a basketball coach for a bit, and she loved that stuff. So to me, that was like a big epiphany where I was like, oh, okay, like I need to like lean into this and do more like storytelling anecdotes to make my points, as opposed to making it like this really dry kind of like intellectual exercise.
So somebody reading your book's gonna have you explain something, and then you're gonna have a story right? Or an anecdote or whatever that ties into it. So it's the reason I bring that up is so many books are dry, right? So your
Mhm.
friend did you a favor. You might have thought about it already, but by them encouraging you to do more, that was a blessing, right? Really was.
Yeah, I'm always worried. I'm always worried when I write stories, like put my own in, or like, am I talking too much about like personal stuff? Do people want just like the hard, cold facts? So that was really great because I was like, oh no, I'm just going to go totally like balls to the wall.
But you
I
can't
just,
attract everybody, can we, Eric? You need to attract
yeah,
your
that's true.
tribe. You need to attract somebody
Hmm.
like me that appreciates the stories, that appreciates more detail, right? And then you're going to have that person, as you mentioned, that just want the facts and that, but they're not going to buy your book, and you don't want them to, because there's a rhyme and
Hmm.
reason for why people are attracted to anything, right? Their
Right. I wouldn't,
personality.
yeah. Yeah, it's their personality type, really. And I wouldn't want to write a book like that anyway, really cold and dry. So maybe the reason why, I guess that's the epiphany. The reason why it was so smooth was it was a lot of fun. Like for me, my mindset is always have fun. And for me, fun is telling stories and making insane, obscure references to like 1970s hip hop culture. Like
That's
that's fun
sweet.
for me.
That's sweet.
So hopefully
So
people get that from the book.
So is that what differentiates you specifically from other personality books that are out there already?
I'd say aside from the slight difference in methodology, which I focus more on like a values-based methodology versus I think a lot of personalities type methods focus on what they can see on the outside. Like what is someone good at? What does someone tend to do? I tend to focus more on why they do it. And also, yeah, that would probably be the other differentiator is that I think I wrote the book with a lot of fun. Like it's people might think it's a little frivolous or that the tone is kind of like maybe too nonsensical sometimes, but I feel like I'm always trying to connect to something important and substantial, and hopefully people will get that.
Well, and I know of a lot of authors. The publisher of my book, him and I have become really good friends. He lives in the States, and we have conversations. He just turned 40. I'm in my late 50s, but we have conversations about books and how things should be written. And at the end of the day, like I said, you're just trying to find your tribe. You're trying to find the person that appreciates the way your delivery is, and keeping your unique self. I find so many people are
Mhm.
phony when it comes to books. I've read books of people and then met them, and it's not. I want to read a book and know that when I meet Eric, or so for the people watching or listening, you want to read his book and you want to know when you meet him. It came to life through the pages of the book. Is it going to tell everything
Right.
about Eric? No, but it's going to give you a good template of what Eric is, and that's what we're looking for. You're looking for that person that's going to go, I can't wait to meet Eric someday, right? Or I can't wait to look at another post or a video or whatever that Eric's done, or maybe join his program because his book was larger than life, right?
Yeah, I definitely think my book captures my voice very well. Now, whether people like that voice or not, it's kind of sarcastic and
Yeah.
sometimes occasionally mean, but which it does kind of fit a little bit.
Sarcasm? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
There's nothing wrong with sarcasm, tasteful sarcasm. And sometimes I do use shutdown sarcasm. Sometimes I use sarcasm because that person you're communicating with or the people you're communicating with just you need to assert yourself. So I use tasteful sarcasm sometimes in my day or life, and other times it's just shut down sarcasm because I want to move on.
And it's unfortunate because a lot of people aren't particularly great at understanding sarcasm, I feel,
No,
in the last generation. They
no,
watch a satire and think, oh, this is like real, right? This is like they'll look at a satire and think it's like a documentary,
yeah.
and
Oh yeah,
but
there is specific people that get sarcasm, how to understand it, how to deliver it, how to be tasteful about it, how to be assertive about it. And I know my five kids are all adults. My youngest is 25, my oldest is 38, and they understand being with dad. They understand sarcasm, right? And then family and friends, they'll come visit and they'll bring adult friends of theirs, and I'll be my normal self, and their person looks and what? And my daughters or my son will say, actually, he's just kidding, right? He just because they don't understand it. They didn't grow up in that, right? Where my kids did. So, and I'm attracted more to people that deliver and understand it. Makes sense, right?
right, Yeah, because there's a certain kind of complexity for obvious reasons. Like it's not like just being the reverse of something. Sarcasm is like trying to understand that we're all kind of flawed, right? And it's kind of exposing that. But
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing I want to discuss is you consider and label yourself a bad student. We talked a little bit about this earlier. I don't know if it was before we started recording or it was initially, but I myself am pretty much consider myself not to be the best student either. Right. I struggled to find my place and to be heard. And I would say things because I wanted to be heard, didn't necessarily resonate with certain teachers. But
oh yeah.
even when I went to college, same thing, right? But my personally, I want to get your opinion on some of this stuff. Like, I feel personally, the education system of the last 60, 70 years is broken in many ways. It's effective in some ways, but it's broken because it stops people from being creative and teaching them how to grow to new heights. We've literally got to a point where school teaches most people how to be good workers, right?
Hmm.
How to be that person to go to a 9 to 5 job and be on that hamster wheel. They're not really teaching them. I'm not saying all teachers are like that or all circumstances, but I'd say majority of what I've experienced, both in researching European or U.S. or Canadian education systems, it literally was designed and created as a giant babysitting system, putting people through a regimented program, which has sometimes hasn't changed. Little nuances might change in the last 20, 30 years. They're focusing on too much useless information instead of teaching people how to be creative, to be, a person that's leveling up and always on the climb. What are your thoughts on this? And how does your coaching assist teachers and educators in general to not be that way?
Well, so with the personality typing methodology that's mentioned in the book, like by the way, I 100% agree with all of what you said. Um, it separates people into four groups, and one of the largest groups is I call them gatherers, kind of like the hunter-gatherer tribes of the past, and it makes up about half the population. So that's a large percentage of our population that have specific value, like a certain value system. So if you're wondering like what value gets pushed on a lot of people, it's the gatherer value, and that's safety and security. And that can be a great thing. Like, I think we need safety and security. In a school, you want to feel safe. You want it to be a safe space where you're not going to get like, you know, things happening to you. Unfortunately, that's not always the case now, especially in America. But when you have that, it can also go be twisted into something quite bad. And I think when we're so focused on safety and security, I think, and so many teachers are gatherers, they're really pushing this kind of like, well, no, do this because this is the safe route. Like you take this linear approach to life where you just follow and paint by the numbers, and you're going to be quote unquote guaranteed, a corner office or at least a cubicle where you can stay your entire life and make this amount of money and never have to worry about surviving. And I think that's the worst part of the gather experience. I think it's great to value safety and security, but I think, as you can see with education system, that's what happens is you end up like not encouraging people to take chances and take intellectual risks. And if you don't do that, then we don't create anything, because when you create stuff, more than likely the stuff you create is going to fail, right? Like, let's say, I don't know what the percentages are, but 80 to 85% of new ventures fail. And I think we're not taught as students or in school that that failure is okay. That's actually great. You can learn a lot from that failure, right? How to do it better the next time, how to change things, how to adjust. Life is going to be pretty tough. I once had a student, he got a B, the very first B in his life. And I'm not talking about like a grade. I'm talking about like just one test score. He got a B. And I remember telling him, I was like, you know, this is like probably the best thing that's ever happened to you in school. And he was just like dumbfounded. He was like, what? Like, I got a B. And I'm like, no, if you can't handle getting a B in school, how are you going to handle when life hits you? How are you going to handle when your parents pass away? How are you going to handle all these tough things that are going to be thrown at you? And if you can't, then, can't handle a grade and a test, you're going to have trouble. So,
Well, yeah, it's people have to learn. Like you said, failure is okay. I tell people all the time, it's okay. And you're probably right. 85% sounds pretty accurate of people failing because they pick themselves up and they don't dust themselves off. They don't put a band-aid on the boo-boo and move forward, knowing that people like Colonel Sanders approach 1,100 different financial institutes until he got money for KFC, right? You look at what Dave Thomas went through, Ray Kroc went through, all these, even Sam Walton, if anybody's ever read his story, what these people all had was stick to itiveness. They were not quitters, right? They were like, one of my favorite motivational people, Les Brown, like always said, right? Quitters never win and winners never quit, right? At the end of the
Mhm.
day, we have to understand failure is part of life. How do we interpret that failure? How do we look at that failure and use it as a stepping stone to move forward, right? And not quit
Right.
on life. And if we don't teach our children that, like you have these teachers that can be really negative and or make students feel dumb so that they don't want to take any risk. They don't want to put up their hand and ask a question. And I'm not saying they're bad people. Maybe that same thing happened to them, and now they're taking that pattern and teaching it as a teacher. So that's why I wanted to ask to see what your thought process was, and you know what do they do to strive to be the best version of themselves if they're getting always crushed and talked down to in a school system?
Yeah, I think we're just so nowadays people are so, it's not just kids, but humans in general are so used to being comfortable and definitely very opposed to discomfort, for lack of a better term, right? And failure is definitely uncomfortable, and I think we just have to get used to discomfort. Discomfort is good because it makes us have to adjust in order to be comfortable. And in those adjustments, that's when I guess for lack of a better term, the magic happens, right? Where we're like, you just look at Abraham Lincoln's life too. Like you had mentioned a lot of like entrepreneurs, but Abraham Lincoln, like I forgot, I had a shirt, I think, or maybe it was just a long quote where it tells you his political life. And I'd say 90% of the things that he did, he failed. Like he lost this, lost, win, lost, and then became president of the United States. And as an American, I mean, I'm a historian, but he's generally considered our greatest president for obvious reasons. And that path came with a lot of failure first.
Well, look at the most famous. Like I don't obviously know U.S. history as well as you do, but I look at all the famous military people in the U.S. How many times did they always win on that Battle of the Hill? Not
Mhm.
necessarily, but they didn't give
Right,
up,
Washington.
right?
Mhm.
Right, and then they regrouped, and he knew enough to be a leader, but he knew enough to also listen to other people's input to take it and make it, better. And he continued to push forward. And so many people just don't realize that failure is a fact of life. There is people out there that get it. They get that home run right away, but it's so small. It's infant. It's so small. Like decimal place
Oh
wise,
yeah.
it wouldn't even be 0.000. Like they're so small of the people that can do it on the first hit at the plate, right?
Right, and even if they do it on their first hit, like, if they keep that mentality of like, "Oh, this is easy and I don't have to work for it," then they won't get another one. They're not gonna, like, get as lucky again, where you see, like, especially with sports, which I mean, we had brought sports up previously, but I think sports is great because it immediately teaches you to to understand failure, because no one goes through life playing sports without losing, like, a lot. And I think that's something that picking yourself back up and playing harder. You're not going to get better unless you play harder opponents. And when you play harder opponents, guess what? You're going to lose most of the time. And that's okay, because you're not going to, if you keep it up and keep working, those losses are going to get tighter until you're going to start winning a lot of those. And then what do you do then? Then move up to the next opponent.
Well,
And I think that's a lot like life.
look how many teams, we talk about sports. Look how many teams that suck for years and years as they're developing their young players for them to learn that together everybody achieves more, that team mentality. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're not
Mhm.
losing. Like you said, they're winning more. And they're winning more. And then maybe they win the championship or they win their division or whatever. But it's a culmination. Nobody just all of a sudden falls off the back of a truck and they're just like the greatest athlete or the greatest business person. There has to be a trial and error, right? System
Right.
and correction and implementation. And it has to be a process.
And there has to be some pain. Obviously, there's some literal physical pain
Yeah.
when you're playing sports, right? But also, I mean, there's emotional pain. No one likes to lose. No one's like, "Oh yeah, that's great. I'm going to lose, and this is like a great learning experience." I mean, you can think that mentally, but every competitive person hates losing, and it hurts. Like maybe even viscerally it hurts. And I feel like that should be the same attitude we should take for school. It should physically hurt. We should feel like failure hurts as opposed to being afraid to have kids feel that way, because I think that's good, because that's going to make them become, like you were saying, more creative. Like, how are you going to think through this problem on your own? Because people aren't going to give you the answers just so that you feel good.
And they shouldn't, right? You look at
No.
you look at you look at kids where they've been spoon fed through their whole lives, not just through education. Everything's given to them, as you and I have discussed. And then maybe their big sister or brother or their mom or dad are helping them with their homework. And initially it's okay to help a child with homework, but then you got to let them get that B or that D or that F. So they feel that tinge of pain, so that, oh my goodness, I don't like that. What do I need to do next, teacher, mom, dad? Well, you need to put more effort in. Instead of doing this, you need to put more time into doing your homework or reading or being critical or creative to get past that. Because there's so many people today that have everything hand fed to them, spoon fed to them.
Right. And you do that, then it takes away all their agency. And I remember a story when I was younger. I was like, I was probably like more 5 or 6. And I'm Chinese, so we would go to dim sum quite a bit, and with dim sum, you have the carts that are people are pushing, right? And there's food on the carts, and you have to like call them over and then like ask for what you want. And I always had this favorite dish when I was, well, I mean, it's still one of my favorite dishes, but definitely when I was a kid, I loved it. And I knew exactly what the cart looked like. I knew what the trays looked like so that I could see it and go, oh, the cart's going to come. And I remember my dad would mess with me. He's like, oh, okay, well, just call them over here. But as a 5-year-old, I'm like, I'm not going to call over an adult. That's scary. Like, I'm going to call, like, what am I going to do? Like, I would just panic. And he's like, well, if you don't call them over here, I'm not going to call them and I'm not going to stop them. So, if you really want that food, you're going to stop. And, as the cart was passing by, I was thinking, maybe he's just lying. Maybe he's just lying. And he'd just be like, look, that cart's passing by. Look, look, look. And finally, at the last minute, I'll be like, okay, stop, stop. And looking at it back in it now, it's like I was so stressed out about those things, but that really encouraged me to take agency
Life
in my
lesson.
life, right?
Life
Yeah,
lesson.
and
Thanks,
it's a life
Dad.
lesson.
Yeah, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, and it's not like the people are gonna like what I'm gonna embarrass myself. The waitress or the wait staff was probably like, oh, look at this cute little kid who's like trying to like wait. That's great. Like they're not gonna think I'm dumb or something. They're like, oh, this 5-year-old is calling us down. Okay, like what do you want?
That's
Like,
awesome,
but
though. I love that.
yeah.
Those little things that we realize or have those epiphanies that we learned from our parents, right? And you may have
Mhm.
shared that before or talked about it before, but I appreciate it because so many people don't. They don't actually take stock of what they learned as a child, good, bad, or ugly, because sometimes it's not.
Yeah, and you can use it. Like I do that with my nephew now, where I'll make him order, even though he's kind of shy and he's like, "Oh, I'm indecisive." I'm like, well, if you're not going to order it, then I guess we're not going to get any food, or you're not going to get any food. I'm going to get my food because I'm going to order it, because I think parents oftentimes are so afraid of making their kids uncomfortable like that. But I'm like, no, that's going to be good because look, they're not going to have a heart attack, nothing bad. Lightning's not going to strike them down. They're going to actually learn something from that discomfort.
Oh, absolutely. So, Eric, how many personality types are there, and how does one differentiate them?
So I had mentioned before, I separate groups into 4 packs,
Yeah,
which is really interesting when you mentioned that previous book that also did 4
yeah,
separate things. I think there's a chapter in my book that goes over like how throughout history, even as far back as Plato, we've separated things into 4. But so I separate 4 packs, and from those 4 packs, there are 4 animal types within each pack. So animals are great. They're very easy to remember. If you tell someone they're a fox, people know exactly what a fox personality type is, right? So if you get 4 times 4, I guess if my math is right, that's 16. So a total of 16 different animal personality types. But if you share a pack with an animal, another personality type, that means you're going to be more similar to them. So I would separate the 4 packs into gatherers, hunters, shamans, and smiths. And so if you'd imagine like a medieval village, those would be the roles that we'd have, which would explain you don't really need a blacksmith, like that many blacksmiths. You really only need 1 or 2 to make the tools, but you do need a lot of hunters to hunt the animals. So there's more hunters in our population than smiths. And each one values something entirely different. I think I'd mentioned that gatherers value safety and security. Hunters value excitement, like visceral, like feel the world excitement. Shamans value self-knowledge, like knowing about themselves and knowing about other people. and Smiths value information. And I think that's probably the easiest way I can divide the four. And I used to say knowledge for Smiths, but then everyone thinks that they value knowledge the most. And so then I just changed it to a less sexier word, information. Um, but yeah, those are the four definitive groups. And then of course within them, four animals.
Yeah, that's amazing. I like that. That's the first time I've heard that different, how to differentiate the personalities. I like that because it's easy to hear it. It's easy to say, "Oh, well, I can appreciate that," or "I can see myself that way." It's very. I look forward to actually reading your book because I've always fascinated about other people's knowledge in regards to personalities and stuff, and it's helped me throughout my life. And I'm always looking to learn and empower myself more. What would you?
Well, you raised five kids.
Yeah,
Sorry, I said you
yeah.
raised five kids, and I'm sure I'm gonna guess
Four
that. Yeah.
daughters, four
Uh,
daughters and a
and
son.
I'm guessing they didn't have the same personality.
Not
So with
even
the,
close.
yeah, so they're gonna a lot of clash,
Not
and
even
especially not the
close.
same with you. So there's another clash there
And then
too,
on
right?
and then on top of all of that, I couldn't figure out as I was raising my kids, as a side note, why I was always anxious all the time. Well, then I found out through a lady I met, and she's actually been on my show two different times. She's an empath coach, and she told me when
Mm.
I met her personally at a conference that I was speaking at a few years back, and she says, "You're an empath." I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Yes, you are. Let's sit down and have a coffee or water or whatever we did." And she went through this exercise with me. She says, "You're an empath, a very powerful one. And tell me stuff about your childhood, your kids and raising them and stuff." And I did. She says, "My goodness," she says, "you're a giant antenna. You're picking up all the radio frequencies from your daughters in the house. And what was your son like?" I said, "He hid all the time." Right. He hid all the time because his sisters would drive him crazy. They'd try to drag him into a fight. "Thomas, what do you think?" Blah, blah. You know what I mean? Oh my gosh. It just, yeah, it's interesting when we raise our children. And, I don't know if you have kids, but it's character building, and it's in a good way and a bad way.
Yeah, and I can imagine if you're an empath, then that's really easy to already know which pack you're in because you're clearly going to be in the shaman, obviously a shaman pack, right? I
I
mean,
wrote that
they're
down
empaths
actually.
already.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You're like, oh, that's me. And obviously there are four different animals within that, so they deal with their path to self knowledge a little differently based on
So what are
the
the four,
personality type.
what
But
about,
even if you're, yeah,
what are the four animals for shaman then?
so there are dolphins, pandas, baboons, and humpback whales. And so the
Hmm.
difference this is going to get a little wonky, but you could separate the two groups. You could dolphins and pandas over here, and baboons and humpback whales over here. In that one group will tend to try to assimilate more into society. They might they might often become teachers or psychiatrists at a hospital. Like they want to be around people and want to be in organizations. Of course, the weakness is that the organizations sometimes are a little bit restrictive, that they don't like that, but they still have to be around people. Where on the other side, you have the humpback whales and the baboons, and they're more like, no, I'm going to do my own thing. Like I'm my own person, you know. And that's their strengths is they often come off as being pretty confident, um, especially as they get older. Of course, a weakness to that is if you're like constantly like sticking to your principles and maybe like kind of like spitting back at society, then you might be a little lonely, right? You might not have as big of a network.
Oh,
So
okay. That
that
makes,
so
well, it's a good, I appreciate you breaking that down because obviously there's so much integral stuff, over 300 pages worth of it. But at least it gives people that are watching, listening, an idea what the expectation is, because I want them to get your book. I want them to read,
oh yeah, I hope they yeah,
right?
it's really fun, guys. If you read it, you can use it with your kids. Like I bet you like if you when you read it, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, this is why my son is like this. He's hiding because he's probably fairly diplomatic and he doesn't want to get involved in his sister's like stuff,
He doesn't
So
like drama. We can say diplomatic. He's like
oh,
anti-drama,
oh
right?
yeah. I mean, that's one of the types,
Even TV shows. You don't like shows that are all about drama.
oh really? Oh, he just wants to feel like good.
He doesn't like that. It doesn't mean he won't watch them, but it's not his favorite thing, right? He's more into. It doesn't mean he doesn't like a cop show or like action shows and stuff, which will have drama, but he doesn't want the number one thing of it to be drama. right?
Oh, right.
You understand
Yeah,
what I
and I'm sure
mean?
he would, I'm sure like a cop show that has like a crooked cop as the main character or something a little like tense. That would be even more tense for him, right? Like, or like Breaking Bad or something. I don't know if you ever watched
Yeah,
Breaking
no, I
Bad,
haven't
but
watched it, but I'm
that's-
familiar with the
oh,
show. And a lot of my family's watched it. I just never got into it. I like specific type of shows, and obviously it's probably
hmm.
based on my own personality. And I look forward to figuring it out more after I read your book. Is your book available on Audible, or is it just in print?
Unfortunately, it's only in print and digital. I do want to do an Audible. I have to talk to my publishers about that, but
I'm the same
that would be
way.
great.
I haven't done my
Yeah.
Audible. Originally, I started it, and it's just I keep on pushing it away, and I get asked all the time because personally, I listen to books more than I read books.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah, I've heard that quite a bit from a lot of people. That's okay.
especially when I'm traveling or I go on a walk or whatever, I put my earbuds in, like my Apple AirPods, and I'll listen to. I have an Audible subscription. I listen to a lot of books, and I especially like the books that are narrated by the author. So that's another reason. Like my publisher said, "Well, we could hire somebody; they'll do it for you." And I said, "No, I'd rather not. I'd rather take 5, 10 years before it ever hits Audible. It's got to be me. It's got to be me."
Right. I mean, it's your voice, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird to have I mean, it's funny to have a different voice, but you know, that funniness like
We'll do
wanes
we'll
over
do
like
we'll
pages.
do our books with the chipmunks.
Oh yeah, with just
Alvin and
fast
Theodore, well,
speed that up.
right?
I want to do mine with Samuel Jackson. That
Oh,
would be
that
awesome.
that would be awesome,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I do curse a lot in I don't curse a lot, but I do curse in my book. So he would definitely like lean into those, moments.
absolutely. So, what makes your personality typing methodology better than the other ones? Like I was reading, and you talk about MBTI, the Enneagram, etc. What makes yours that different?
I would probably going back to what my dad taught me a long time ago was, he would say, don't only always look at what people don't focus on what people are saying, focus on what they do. And then once you see what they're doing, also try to understand why they do it. And I think that's probably the reason why it's quote, I say better because of course I'm going to say it's better, but maybe that's presumptuous, but I think that's why my methodology is better because it focuses on the internals. So it's not just, oh, this person's an author. That means they're like this personality, right? It's more like, no, but why? Like you can't say that Hemingway has the same personality as Tolstoy. I mean, they have very different like lifestyles, like you can just see it in their biography, right? Hemingway is clearly a hunter. He likes like visceral excitement. He's literally writing about like, deep sea fishing and bullfights where Tolstoy is more of a shaman. He's like getting really internal into people's like personal struggles. And I think that is the difference with my typing methodology, like introversion, extroversion, not a huge fan of that. And I know people are like, what? There's tons of books on introversion. And that was like the first one that Carl Jung came up with, I'm like, yeah, because it's easy to see and it's easy to observe. But like doing this for so long, I've had a lot of people come up to me not liking personality typing because they've said like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense because I'm introverted in this situation and I'm extroverted in this situation. And so I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. So let me figure out a way to like get that out of there and like explain that in a way that probably is more accurate, you know?
Yeah, I like that. Because the next thing I wanted to ask you about was the common pop psychology ideas like extroversion, introversion, birth order, type A, alpha, beta, or overblown, or worse, a myth. Like, what else can you add in regards to all of that?
Well, my favorite or the easiest one to explain is birth order, right? Because that's a big one that I think we assume. We're like, oh, the oldest kid is going to be like this because they're the oldest. But that only works half the time. And the reason why that works half the time is half the time that older child is going to be a gatherer. And gatherers value safety and security. And what gives them safety and security? A set of rules. And what is the rules? Or what are the rules? The rules are the oldest child is responsible for everybody and thus their younger siblings should listen to them, but they also have a duty to be responsible for them. So it's like a push and pull, right? So that I think the reason why people assume that is half the time it works. Half the time you have a gatherer who's an older sibling, and then we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. The older sibling is, and then it just becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy where they're like, oh, okay, that oldest child is supposed to be like this. But coming from me, I have an older sister who was not a gatherer. She's a hunter. she was never like that. She does not like go, oh, I'm the oldest, so I have a duty to help you guys, and you guys got to listen to me. Hers was more like, you guys are annoying me. Stop and listen.
I
That was it.
love
Like
it.
that's it. Where my youngest brother or my youngest sibling, who's my brother, he is a gatherer. So he's the one who like will text us and say, hey, what should we get mom for her birthday? And then my sister and I won't respond. And then he'll be like, text us again. So what about this gift? We won't respond. Okay, I got mom this gift. And we're like, then we respond. And we're like, okay, we'll Venmo you the money. Like that's how conscientious he is. That's not part of our personality, but it is his because he's a gatherer.
That's what my sister would be. I'm one of three. I have two older sisters. My one sister's like that. She will. I'm going to do this, this, and that because I'll reach out and say, "Hey, what are we doing for mom and dad for the anniversary, birthdays, Christmas, whatever?" Oh, we got this. Okay, I'll e-transfer you the money. Right, no problem. Okay, thank you. Put the name down, and I'll take credit. I don't care. Right, I'll jump on the bandwagon of the presents because I don't want to have to worry about it. I just
Mhm.
that's her.
Yeah, some people just naturally take charge,
She
that's
likes
cool.
that, and that's fine, right?
Right.
So when it comes to knowing your personality type, how does it help in romantic or mate relationships or familiar relationships or even a person's career? How can it help with those three areas?
Ooh, I know that's a big question. I would say that knowing your personality type, the greatest thing it can give you is it'll help you get in touch with what you truly want. And I know people can define what they truly want like in tons of different ways. And I know a lot of people say, oh, but doesn't what I want will change over time? And I'm always of the belief that people don't change. We grow into either better or worse versions of ourselves. And I think knowing your personality first can at least help you figure out this is what I really want out of life. It's just to get a lot of information, maybe, or maybe it's to have a safe job. Sometimes that is what people want, or maybe it's to have like a lot of excitement. I always have this thing, especially with careers where I've been telling this story quite a bit. I was teaching him how to shuck oysters and he had just graduated from pharmacy school. And I asked him, like, what do you want to do now? And he's like, as long as I don't have to sit in the same place all day long. And clearly, that's exactly what a pharmacist normally does: is stay in the same place all day long. And I kind of knew that when he started pharmacy school, but of course, it's none of my business. That's my cousin's kid. So what I did, knowing that he's a hunter and he likes to move around, he likes his freedom, he likes excitement and new things every day. I was like, maybe you want to get into pharmaceutical sales because that would be something that you really would like take to, right? Because you get to travel, you get to bounce around, meet different people. It's a hustle, but he has no problem hustling because he's a hunter. Hunters hustle, right? And so I think just in terms of careers, that's just one of those examples of where knowing what you want can help guide you to like kind of pick not necessarily a specific career. You can always change careers, but at least it helps you kind of like know, okay, let me try that or let me try this and see how it goes.
That's awesome. Though, so it makes sense. So how it can help out with personal relationships with significant others, family, with the career. It's just when you're talking about the gatherers or the hunters or the shaman, it literally is helping us be with the person that we're destined to be with, or working with people that we should be working with, or it just makes everybody more glad, happy.
Right. At least, I mean, especially you know best with your five kids, like you're gonna argue, but at least it helps you understand. Oh, you know why we're arguing? It's because they're this personality and they value this. I value this. We just have a value difference, and that's okay. You can't change them. But what you could do is at least appreciate each other a little bit better and maybe argue a little less, or at least when you do argue, at least it won't go like really like to DEFCON 5. Like.
So in essence, so one of the things I wrote down here too, you can't really change somebody's personality type then,
I
or
don't
can
believe
you?
so. I don't. I mean, yes, you could, but that would be like psychological torture, right? Like I feel like that's like,
Are you talking waterboarding?
yeah, like I feel like that's like one of those things where you're like dealing with like the neurons and stuff. Like
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, I think when people do mistake that they've changed, I think it's more they've discovered more about themselves and they've actually realized who they truly are. But I do think when you try to change someone and who truly knows what they are, it's almost like manipulative to the point where that's not going to help because they're basically doing it to appease you. Like, let's say in a romantic relationship, they're only doing it to stay with you. And I don't think that's going to be very healthy for either of you.
Well, you're not living your ultimate version, your unique self, right? When you're trying to,
Right.
and so many people are like that. You'll get into a relationship with somebody, it can be even in work. It doesn't even have to necessarily be a significant other. And they portray themselves a certain way until they drop that facade. And then you find out who they truly are. They aren't they gave you what they thought you wanted, or they gave you what they
Mhm.
always do in relationships to get what they want, and then they drop the veil or the shield, and then you're shocked, and then there's
Yeah.
conflict, right?
Yeah. And then you're just like, what? They're like, well, why are you treating me differently? It's like, well, because you are a different person, like it's a different kind of chemistry now.
Yeah, it's something though. Those that are listening to the show, work at striving to be who you are, whether you're in print, whether you're in video, whether you're face to face.
Mhm.
People come to my house on the same serious or jokester or person that I'm going to be if you meet me in a business setting. Right. Obviously, I might be a
Right.
little bit toned down in a business setting because of the environment I'm in, but I'm still my unique general self. I might just be at home. I may be instead of a work or a business function, I might be at a 4. At home, I'm a 10. I'm just toning it down because of the circumstance of this of the where the environment I'm in. But yeah, be unique, people, right?
Right. Yeah, it's so important. I always say find your anchor first, right?
I
Like
like
find
that.
who you are first, right? And then because then you can branch out because now you have an anchor. You don't have to worry about people changing who you are. You can kind of go, now that I know my anchor, I know my personality type has this kind of weakness. That's okay. I can work on this weakness by maybe borrowing stuff or like habits from other personality types. That's totally healthy. You can kind of like work on your weaknesses, but just know that generally those weaknesses derive also from your strengths. And you don't want to change who you are because that those strengths will recede as
Yeah,
well.
you just
So
want to
find who
adapt.
you are.
You want to adapt in some areas that can enhance who you are as an individual.
Right. Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I like that. So one of the things you put, I was reading for fun, you will actually, you know, well-known people, real or fictional, and you'll actually say what their personality type. Who would be the favorite person that you would give me a couple examples of anybody, whether they're real or fictional, and explain why they are what they are with their personality.
Ooh, I mean, I love to use pop culture. I often
Good.
use that with the students that I coach. Like,
Sure.
I don't know, are you familiar with Game of Thrones?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Like that's a show that I use quite a bit just because it's so expansive. Like it has so many characters and they're so well drawn that when you see the characters bounce off of each other and interact, it's so great for personality typing. So, like, let's say Game of Thrones, like you might have the interesting thing is Tyrion Lannister, the Lannisters. You have like, let's say, one character who's a little person, so thus his dad hates him for other reasons too. But the funny thing is they are actually more similar to each other personality wise than the dad is to like his young or oldest son who he likes, Jamie. Right. So you kind of see that where it's like they do relate a lot of ways, and we see it as an audience where like they actually that dad should really be respecting his youngest son more than he does, which makes it more tragic, right? Because we see their personalities kind of like gelling, but on the outside they're not due to like exterior circumstances.
That makes
So
sense though, because I look at my one daughter. She's very, some people would label her as type A, or even myself as type A. I look at her and she just turned 29. She's a very successful nurse. She's a very successful travel nurse. She also has a business, a dance company on the side because she grew up dancing and stuff. Very much alike, but we also clash a lot, her and I.
mhm,
We clash a lot, and
interesting.
it's probably because and I've been told this by others, and she's even told me the reason we clash is we're too much alike. And I've always kind of thought, no, we're not, but we are, right?
You have probably have very core maybe core values that you share, right? And that but the methods you go about trying to get those are different, and thus you're gonna clash on the method.
Yeah, or she'll ask
You,
me advice on business when she was starting her business a couple years back, and she took my advice. And there's certain things that she'd ask, and I give her advice, and she did her own thing. And
mhm.
I was thinking, like, why aren't you doing it the way I've already got proven results? This is a better way to do it. Well, because if my dad gave me advice as a business owner, which he was, very successful business owner, I didn't always take his advice. Sometimes I went out, wanted to trip myself. I'd get the
Yeah,
boo-boo.
right. Because I mean, you want your own glory, right? Sometimes maybe she's like, well, if I did it the way that you said and I got successful, then people might think, oh, you got successful because you just followed what your dad did. Whereas if she does it on her own, that's her own steam. And she's like, no, this is mine. This victory is mine, not anyone else's,
I love
you
this
know?
conversation. This is awesome. It,
Yeah, she might be a hunter. I'm gonna guess she might be a hunter actually. If you ever read the book, she might be like all that, like dancing and starting your own business and
well,
travel nurse.
she was
You know,
also in high school. She had honors. She worked 2 part-time jobs and belonged to a dance studio plus a dance troupe all throughout high
wow,
school.
yeah, that's a
Right?
lot of stuff.
She's
Yeah, that
always go 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 go. She's very high level, right? And so she did very well in school, plus worked, plus danced. Literally would come home late at night, do homework till whatever time at night, and then sleep very little to get up and start all over
you
again.
do
And
it all
just
over
oh
again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So she probably is a hunter.
Yeah, like I mean, she might be a shark. You know, sharks are just like go go go. I think of Michael Jordan as a shark, and you know how he's like he would smoke cigars, play a round of golf, and then play in the dream team games. Like he was just like it's like how could someone live that way where like they're just exerting so much energy like with no sleep, you
Like
know?
it's
But
like they
some
have
people
they,
do.
they have a internal nuclear power source or a never
Mhm.
ending power source. They never like my daughter, I can't believe like she'll go out and travel nurse and then all of a sudden, and I'm so proud of her, she'll go out and travel nurse and she'll be when they bring her into a hospital like in a different province. For those listening from the states, a province is like a state, we're just call them different. And she'll go and work for a hospital and they'll throw her in the fire because they need
Mm.
right. So she's gotten a reputation of certain hospitals and on the island, for an example, Vancouver Island, which is for those listening, is right above you, and those are listening in LA. That
Mhm.
British Columbia is above you.
That's where
Wave.
That's where Victoria. I've been
Yeah,
to Vancouver actually.
Victoria's
Victoria.
the capital, right? It's located on Vancouver Island, and she's worked there and many different hospitals on the island because she's knowing that when they throw her in the thick of things, they can throw her into a shift where she's working from 3 till whatever, like in the afternoon, she's working night shifts or whatever, and she'll work like for 2 3 weeks, maybe taking a day off because she's just very on the ball, right? And
Yeah, that sounds.
they can count on her to get the job done. And then she'll leave, come back to Alberta, and she's got works the hospitals here, plus runs her dance company. She's very driven.
Yeah, hunters are very like I always associate them with the firefighter type, right? You throw them, like you said, you throw them in a fire. Like they're good at adjusting and being intense and like kind of like focusing on the moment. Like, what's a problem? Focus on as opposed to doing something safe, which is okay too. But like gatherers would much more that would make them very uncomfortable in a situation like that, where they're like, no, no, tell me what I need to do, and I can do that 9 to 5 and make it steady, and I can do that every day consistently. But hunters are more like, no, no, that's not as fun. I want the action. Give me the action. Let
Yeah.
me go here. Okay, let me go here. And it's different. So I'd imagine that daughter might have had some clashes if you have some gatherer daughters
Oh,
occasionally. Where it just.
yep. Yeah.
But I'm
It is
sure
what
that's
it
the fun
is.
of parenting.
Well, yes, parenting has its trials and tribulations and its joys. Not everybody's cut out to be a parent either. We'll just leave it at that,
Oh,
right? It's not like there's a manual. Oh, you want to be a parent, Eric? Here, read this, and you're going to be the ultimate parent. That don't work that way. Not when you have all these different
right.
personalities of these kids, right? And then if your significant other
Mhm.
has a different personality, and that's just that's even the person I had married and then divorced. Our personalities did not intermingle. She doesn't have to be the same as
Mm,
me, but they didn't intermingle at all.
right.
Didn't work.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, yeah. And then, once again, you have to like be able to adjust. And I always think of like Parenthood, the movie Parenthood, Keanu Reeves
Yeah,
line,
yeah.
where he's just like, you need a license to fish, or you need a license to drive, you need a license to fish, but anybody can be a parent, apparently, because he's talking about his dad throwing cigarettes at him and stuff. So yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess there's never an assumption that, someone is going to be good at it just because they are
Well,
good.
yeah, not everybody can be a business owner. Not everybody can be
Yeah,
an entrepreneur. Not everybody can be a rocket scientist or a nurse or a doctor, an accountant. Not everybody's even wired to be a ditch digger, right? To go out and be a
right.
laborer.
I couldn't do that. I would dig the worst ditches, I think.
I would too, and I'm not a fan
Yeah.
of that. Where my son's very much into construction and equipment,
Oh, okay.
and he loves being outside. He works for 21 days on, and he's off a week, and he's out in the thick of the weather, whether it's they're bundling up and it's in the minus digits and snowing, or it's in the summer and it's in the 80s, and he's, you know what I mean. He's just that's him. He's not wired to be
Oh,
I'm not saying he can't be an entrepreneur and do that, but he's not wired to be the traditional entrepreneur like you have a brick and mortar
right.
store. He'd have to be an entrepreneur where he's running a crew of people and they're getting hired to go do this labor job or run this heavy equipment to complete this task. That's where I see. So everybody I think can be an entrepreneur and learn to be an entrepreneur, but in their own wheelhouse,
Right.
right?
Oh yeah, I write that even in the book. Everyone can do everything, but you have to connect to why you want to do it, right? That's the key is like as long as you're doing it for the reason that's true to yourself, then it's perfect. And if you're not, then you probably want to change that up. But
Exactly.
it's really the why is the most important.
Oh, I 100% agree. So, Eric, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
I would say find what you love most of all and pursue that. And it seems simple, but it's not that simple. Especially the first part, finding what you love. But
Yeah, and it's okay when you're on the journey to find what you love that you change your mind.
right. No, exactly. No,
You can you can you
yes,
can
very
like
true.
look how many people have gone on a journey because it's a hobby and they loved it
Mm.
and they became their career or their business or whatever the case may be, and they fall flat on their face because now they lost the enjoyment of it. As a hobby, it was enjoyable. Now when it's has to put food on the table or it has to put the food on the table of maybe staff, they dread it and they hate it. So
Right.
my addition to that would be that's okay if you decide and change your mind, right? Look how many people finish school, university or college in North America. 65 to 80% of people that finish college or university never work in that field because they realize they didn't like it already in this first. It could be the first year school or second, or maybe it's a 4-year program, but they don't want to let anybody down. When really, in reality, they should
Mhm.
be thinking, I don't want to let myself down. It's okay to, I'm not going to finish this program. I'm going to go into something else. I did that. I went into computer engineering, technology at a technical institute here, realized it wasn't really my thing. And I was a semester away from finishing. I didn't finish it. A couple years later, I went into electronics engineering, finished it because I loved it. I realized that was what I wanted more than being a system analyst or a computer programmer or whatever this field I decided to go into when I was done computer engineering, right? So it's okay.
Right. My cousin, that's what I told my cousin's kid. He was just like, I don't know if I want to waste the time I spent in pharmacy school. And I said, you got one life. You want to waste that? You're doing something you don't want to do. We only get one of those, and it doesn't come back to us when we give it up. So,
I always
you know,
tell people, and I stick by this phrase, and I talk about it constantly, and I already mentioned it once. Life is in session, people. This is not a dress rehearsal. Time
mhm,
stops for nobody. You need to utilize your life to the best of your ability. Doesn't mean you won't have points in time in your life where you're camped and you're plateaued because something's gone on. There's a a trauma, a tribulation. There's something that's gone on that slows you down and makes you camp. Weeks, years, some people, months. Who knows how long it's going to be, but don't beat yourself up. Just learn. Personal development's great. That's why I always tell people listen to great motivational podcasts. It's going to piss some people off. Stay away from true crime, a waste of your time, right? It just is. I'm
yeah,
sorry if you like that. Great. But integrate in around that some personal development stuff that's going to help you grow, that's going to help you get out of your rut so you can climb. Listen to some good books, read some good books, go to some, don't live a life of finding drama to feed your negativity that you're feeling. That's going to keep you camped forever.
right. No, that's a great piece of advice.
Right. So, um, Time's up, brother. I want to respect our listeners in your time. What's the best way that people can reach you?
I have two websites. I know it sounds random, but one website actually has a test that you can take to figure out what personality you are. It's called utopiaproject.com. And that's like YOU-topia, like YouTube.
Yeah.
So utopiaproject.com. And then if you just flip that around, you'll get my life coaching website. And that's Project Utopia, YOU, projectutopia.com.
Sweet.
And those are the two sites. Yeah.
I'll make sure that they're in the show notes. For those new to the Give a Heck podcast, you can go to giveaheck.com. Go to the top, hit podcast. You'll see Eric's picture. You'll see the abbreviated show notes along with his social media contacts and both websites that he just mentioned, as well as a timeline where you can actually look, and if there's something you heard and you thought, oh, at 22 minutes or whatever, you can go down and find what it is you wanted to hear again, so you don't necessarily have to listen to the whole episode again. I suggest you listen to it again, but that's just me, right? I like listening to my game day film or my reel or whatever, like back to sports, right?
Yeah.
What is it? What do? They want to get better. Players watch the games they played in, coaches, they break it down, right? That's how we become more of the ultimate version of ourselves, right?
Yeah, we have to be self-critical.
Absolutely.
Even though it makes us uncomfortable, that discomfort's great.
Oh my gosh. Listen to my first 10 podcasts, maybe first 100, and then listen to the next 100. They're completely like, I get better. I hope I do. I hope I elevate my game, right?
And the coolest thing is that growth is often in the subconscious, right? Where you're just like, yeah, it just happens naturally because you're just trying.
Absolutely. So any last words, Eric, before I wrap up the show?
No, I had a lot of fun. It was great talking to you. And I was happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for investing your time in the Give a Heck listeners and myself. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Dwight.
So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Eric. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn. It is never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.